We tend to tell the story of Western civilization like it's a fairy tale. Rome falls, the lights go out for 1,000 years of dark ages, and then Europe suddenly wakes up in the Renaissance, dusting off classical statues and inventing the modern world. But knowledge doesn't just hang in the air waiting to be remembered. Papyrus rots in damp climates. Ink slowly fades. Dead languages become unreadable. Without people actively copying and teaching them, ideas simply vanish. Two specific achievements of the ancient world were on the verge of permanent erasure. The first was Greek scientific reasoning. The second was the Roman system of law. The intellectual blueprints for the modern world did not survive by accident. They endured because they were salvaged, codified, and physically smuggled across the Mediterranean by the refugees of a dying empire, the Byzantines. Western history was nearly broken. What we call modern progress was actually a rescued inheritance, salvaged from the brink of total loss. To understand what was rescued, we have to look at what the Greeks and Romans built. The Greeks engineered a massive intellectual shift from mythos, blaming natural events on angry gods, to logos, the pursuit of rational empirical observation. Pythagoras applied mathematics to decode the physical universe, looking past the star myths of his predecessors to find underlying patterns. Meanwhile, the Romans were engineering their own logical system, but for human behavior. Over centuries, they evolved customary tribal rules into a highly sophisticated written legal science. They developed the jus civile, or civil law. Instead of relying on the absolute decree of a king, professional jurists argued over precedents, creating a flexible framework of rules that could govern a massive, diverse empire. Rational inquiry and codified law provided the tools necessary to organize a complex society. Without them, the specific logic required to manage a continent-spanning empire or a structured economy would have vanished. In 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire collapsed. State administration vanished and literacy plummeted. But the eastern half, governed from Constantinople, remained entirely intact. Recognizing the chaos consuming the West, the Eastern Emperor Justinian ordered an extraordinary salvage operation. He commanded his scholars to gather, organize, and write down 1,000 years of scattered Roman legal precedents. The result was the Corpus Juris Civilis. This dense, meticulously organized encyclopedia captured the entirety of Roman jurisprudence in one place, shielding it from the political collapse happening in Europe. While Justinian saved Roman law, later Byzantine scholars protected the Greek mind. Intellectuals like Princess Anna Komnene actively wrote and studied in classical Attic Greek, preserving the exact vocabulary of logos used by ancient philosophers. For 10 centuries, Constantinople operated as a holding pattern for human knowledge. While the rest of Europe lost access to these texts, the Byzantines kept the blueprints safe. That safety ended in the 15th century. The expanding Ottoman Empire slowly swallowed Byzantine territory, culminating in the final siege and capture of Constantinople in 1453. Facing the end of their civilization, a wave of Byzantine scholars, scribes, and cardinals fled. They packed up everything they could carry, most importantly, their libraries of ancient, untranslated manuscripts. These refugees boarded ships and crossed the Mediterranean, seeking asylum in the West. They gravitated toward the wealthy, independent Italian city-states, primarily Rome and Venice, which already had deep maritime ties to the east. High-profile exiles like Cardinal Bessarion arrived carrying heavy, bound volumes of classical texts that Western Europe hadn't seen in centuries. The destruction of Constantinople triggered a massive physical transfer of knowledge. The dying empire exported its memory directly into the heart of Italy. The refugees settled in and built new lives. In Venice, the Greek community grew so large they constructed their own permanent institutions, like the Church of San Giorgio dei Greci. To survive, many of these exiles began working as tutors. They taught young Italians how to read classical Greek, a skill that had almost entirely vanished in the West. Suddenly, local scholars could actually read the manuscripts the refugees had brought with them. The philosophical payload was massive. The foundational texts of Plato and Aristotle flooded into Italian intellectual circles, reintroducing the rigorous inquiry that would eventually underpin the modern scientific world. The legal payload was just as potent. Copies of Justinian's Corpus Juris Civilis reached the first European universities, like Bologna. There, scholars used it to construct the jus commune, the shared legal framework that forms the basis of civil law in dozens of modern nations today. The rediscovery of these ancient texts provided the spark for centuries of European inquiry. By ferrying the works of the ancient world to Italian shores, these refugees handed over the raw materials that eventually built our modern legal and scientific reality.